Hi everyone, Ryan here from Fight Game Analysis, and today we are going to be talking about the upcoming fight between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. If you've been enjoying the content, please go ahead and click on the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate your support. Alright, UFC 264, major fight coming up between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. This is it, this is the rubber match, the trilogy. They went 1-1, each stopped each other in their first two fights. Have to do this third one, man, and it is awesome. Let me tell you, I'm a huge fan of rubber matches. When two guys are out there and they split the first two fights, you got to have that third one. It's about legacy. It's about the fight game itself. It's about having these questions answered about who's the better man. It's just something that everybody wants to see. Fans love it. Typically, the fighters are looking forward to it, love it. They want to settle it and see who actually is the better fighter. So it's a great thing. Fortunately, we don't always get it, but we are now. And then on top of that, just to put a little bit of icing on the cake, is that we get it right when we should. We get this third fight right after the second fight. No tune-ups, no warm-ups. We're not stretching this out years down the road, hoping that it builds into something bigger because it's all about the money. These men are rematching right away. So I think we're going to get something great here. That's really why this fight is so exciting. Going into their last fight, I made a Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier first thoughts on the rematch. Throw the link to it up here. And in that, I broke down kind of the history of the fighters, where they had come since their first fight, their styles, all those types of things. So I'm not really going to get into that again. You can always go back, you can check that link, you can get a little bit more background info on each fighter. Instead, what I'm going to do for the analysis and prediction for this third fight is really focus on what just happened in their second fight. That's what's going to be most relevant because it's about how each man's style lines up against the other man. And it's also the fact that they haven't had any fights in between then. So it's the most relevant because that's their most recent fight. I went back and I looked at this fight. I really watched it. And what I found was that I had remembered it slightly differently than it really was. I watched the fight live when it all happened, took it in. I hadn't rewatched it until I went to handicap this fight. When I went back and watched this fight, I realized that Conor McGregor had a lot more success than I initially thought. When you look at the way they came out in that first round. Now, here's the thing. He was in a boxing-based stance for the most part. He was pretty heavy on that front foot. And I think that was because of all the talk about the fight with Manny Pacquiao. He went out there and he fought Floyd a couple years ago in a boxing match and made more money in that fight than he had made in any of his MMA fights. And now there's talk about him fighting Manny Pacquiao. It will probably even do bigger. It will probably even be a bigger fight, bigger sales, bigger pay-per-views, particularly internationally. It's just through the roof. And they were talking about that. And in the build-up to that second fight with Poirier, he said it was basically a done deal, the fight with Pacquiao. It's basically a done deal. We figured out everything other than just signing the contracts. I'm going to get this fight done with Poirier and move on to that. And I think because of that, a lot of his training in that second fight with Dustin, for that second fight with Poirier, was really heavy boxing based. He was trying to really get that under control and that build up and get as much time training boxing as he could for this fight with Pacquiao. In a way, almost overlooking Poirier. And we saw that the way that he came out and the way that he looked. I mean, his hands were sharp, they were crisp, he was landing good shots, but you could just see it in the way that his stance and the way that his weight placement and everything. That's why the calf kick was so effective. It was because of the stance that he took. But when he comes out in that first fight, as I mentioned, he had a lot more success than I initially remembered. He was landing his shots good. He was getting the left hand off. He was backing Poirier up right out of the gate, put him on his back foot. McGregor got taken down. But he got back up, did not take any damage when he got taken down. Got back up, then on top of it, flipped it around. They were in the clinch against the cage. McGregor absolutely won that work inside the clinch. Landed shoulder strikes, landed an elbow, landed some good shots. Took it back out to the middle of the cage. Continued to land the more significant strikes. Got off with the right hand and with the left hand. No, not a flawless performance by any stretch of the imagination. I thought Dustin Poirier got off 2 or 3 check right hooks. They were really good. Those counter right hooks that he threw. When McGregor overcommitted on his punches, when he stepped too far forward, throwing that left hand, leaned out over that knee a little bit too much. Poirier caught him with some beautiful counter right hooks. Right? One time he pointed at him, another one he wobbled him in the second round, got off right away within like the first 30 seconds in the first round. I mean, he's shown it in the past against Dan Hooker, against Max Holloway. That check right hook's beastie. And he got it off against Conor McGregor, and I fully expect him to be able to get it off again in this fight. We need to take all that into consideration when we look at it. So if Conor McGregor was doing that, he was having all the success, he was doing good and everything and all that, why did he end up getting stopped in the second round? Well, really for me, it all revolves around one thing. That's that calf kick. Once Dustin Poirier landed that calf kick, once he saw success with it, once he saw that Conor McGregor didn't have an answer for it, man, it was over. As soon as he started to land that calf kick, the entire complexion of the fight changed. McGregor had to start shutting down his offense. He was immediately worried about what was coming back, about that calf kick coming at him and how he was going to defend against that, how he was going to counter it. What he was doing was basically completely ineffective. I mean, he tried to counter a couple times, but it wasn't really hard shots. Caught the leg ones, didn't do anything with it. Dustin Poirier, in the post-fight press conference, talked about how McGregor was starting to kind of check it, starting to try to turn his shin out a little bit, but he wasn't getting the bone out enough. So even then, it wasn't really doing too much. That was what changed everything about the first fight. And at that point, that's when Dustin Poirier was able to start getting his boxing off, because he's got really good boxing. He's got really good hands. But it wasn't until that calf kick came that he's able to start getting it off and then eventually get the stoppage. That was the piece of the fight where everything hinged. Now, taking all that into consideration, what's it going to look like when these two step in the octagon at UFC 264? And it's funny. It's funny, man. It's funny. This is a really tough one. Because on the one hand, we've got the age-old adage. You knock a man out, you knock him out quicker in the rematch. Well, that's why big reason why I thought Conor McGregor was going to win in the rematch. He didn't. He ended up getting stopped. So I was completely wrong there. But how does it apply going into this fight? Because the fact of the matter is, Dustin Poirier absolutely has a psychological advantage over Conor McGregor. He went out there, took his shots in the first round, figured out an answer with that calf kick, and knocked him out in the second round. That means you got the psychological advantage. When you're stepping back into the octagon, 6-7 months later, he absolutely has the one-up mentally on Conor McGregor going into this. And that's big. Any fighter will tell you that 90% of the game's mental. But when I look at the actual performance from their last fight, and I try to imagine the way that their styles and their techniques are going to play out in this fight, I have to give the edge to Conor McGregor. He's got the faster hands, and I think Dustin Poirier had a problem with that in their first fight. I think that McGregor throwing that left hand out of the southpaw stance, I think it threw Poirier off a little bit. He kept trying to hide his chin behind that right shoulder, and he couldn't do it. McGregor was able to step off to the side a little bit, get the angle, and land that shot. See, the thing is, Conor McGregor's flat-footed when he fights, but he still creates all the angles. Understands distance and timing and creates those angles. He does it through slight shifts, upper body movement, different things like that. Figures out the timing through pulling back a little bit and getting out of range and then coming back in and striking big. He's got really good reach. Just kind of knows how to get that left hand off. Dustin Poirier was having a problem with that. He was getting caught by those shots. Got caught right on the end of a beautiful left hand, so much so that he admitted in the post-fight press conference to being hurt. He said, yeah, McGregor caught me with a really hard shot, hurt me, I was buzzed. If he would have followed up and landed, pressed the issue and landed more punches, who knows what would have happened at this point. That pretty much tells me he would have been out of there. So this is a tough one for me to go with all that being said. But I'm going to go with Conor McGregor in this fight. I think he's going to find a way to come out there, and I think his boxing is going to be superior. I think he's going to have an answer for that calf kick. Whether it's stepping back out of the way or whether it's getting his leg rotated out, his shin bone out to be able to check that type of a thing. I really like the way that his boxing looked, and I think he'll be able to continue to get his shots off. I like the way he went to the body with the left hand. I like how smooth he was upstairs with the 1-2. He led with the left hand. I like the way he even was getting the right hand off with like a little shovel punch and different counters. I think he looked good with everything. I like the way he handled the wrestling. Should Dustin Poirier go to wrestling, which I believe he will, he did within the first minute of the first round in their last fight, and I think he will at this time. I don't really have a reason to believe that it's going to go any different than it did in that first fight. He took him down one time. McGregor got back up with taking no damage and actually won in the clinch. Should they get into the clinch this time? I still think McGregor's going to have the upper hand. All of these different scenarios, all of these different positions, all of the different ways their techniques line up, I think McGregor has the slight edge in most of them. As good as Dustin Poirier is, man, and he's awesome. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's going to land his shots. He's going to get that counter right hook off. He's a very good fighter. He'll get a takedown or maybe two, depending on how long the fight lasts. But I just think that overall, as the fight continues to play out in all of these different ways, I think the advantage goes to Conor McGregor in almost everything. However, that being said, I think if this fight goes late, if it goes all the way and the men don't get an early stoppage, I think the cardio and the grind, I'm going to give the nod to Dustin Poirier in that position. I think that that's when he would come out and he'll be able to shine. That's when he would be able to take over the fight. Will it be enough to get the victory? I don't think so. Like I said, I think Conor's going to walk away with this one. I think he's going to get the W. To be honest, I think he gets the stoppage. He hurt Poirier in the first one. I think he'll hurt him and finish him again this time. I think it's going to be early, probably first or second round. That's when McGregor does his best work. He comes out and people just have a problem handling that power. Anybody other than Nate Diaz, apparently, right? So let me know what you guys think. Is this going to be a big win for Conor McGregor? Or is this going to kind of really put a black mark on where he stands, really? You think about it, he comes out, drops to Dustin Poirier in this one, is inactive as he's been in the past years, and then he comes back and gets this. Elevates Dustin Poirier right up to the absolute top of the division. He'll be next in line for a title shot. So let me know what you guys think. Which way is this one going to go?